Hey friends, I hope you're doing well. So as we're going through the book of Deuteronomy, I'm picking out things that I think have an important application in our lives, even as new covenant believers. In chapter number 7, Moses reminds them that they are the chosen people of God. So he starts off and he says, and when the Lord your God brings you into the land that you are entering to take possession of it, and clears away many nations before you, the Hittites and the Girgashites and the Amorites and the Jebusites, 7 nations more numerous and mightier than you. And when the Lord your God gives them over to you and you defeat them, then you must devote them to complete destruction. Now notice, the source of the victory is always God. He goes, I'm going to give them over to you and you will defeat them, a people greater than you. But God is the one who's giving it to them. Now it seems harsh in our concept to think of, completely destroying them, but continue on and look at God's purpose in this. He says, you shall make no covenant with them and show no mercy to them. You shall not intermarry with them, giving your daughters to their sons or taking their daughters for your sons, or for they will turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you and he would destroy you quickly. And think about it. He says, God understands that if they go in and don't completely destroy these people, then they're going to intermarry. And when they intermarry with people that are worshiping other gods, those people will deceive them and distract them from God. Remember, he said, I am a jealous God. You belong to me, not to gods that can't hear or smell or do anything for you. 2 Corinthians 6:14, he says, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness? I think this has a lot of application, certainly for marriage. How can people who have two different sets of values, two moral codes, how can they live as one together? It might have some application in, who you partner in business with. He's just saying, listen, you've been called out of the darkness and into the light. You can't partner in darkness without affecting the light. Well, then he goes on in verse number 5. He says, but thus shall you deal with them. You shall break down their altars and dash in pieces their pillars and chop down the Asherim and burn their carved images with fire. Now, I think we saw this in Exodus 2, and he's reminding them, listen, you can't let any of it stand. So I'm thinking here, what are the false gods in our own Western culture? What are the false gods that when we become the children of God that need to be destroyed, torn down, and turned away from? Well, because we don't have, for the most part, Hindu type gods or Buddhist type idols or things like that. What are those things? Well, covetousness is an idol. Lust and greed, those are things that we could consider idols that need to be torn down and destroyed. The worship of heroes and mankind. But just ask yourself, what is distracting me from the king and the kingdom? And then you'll find the idol that needs to be destroyed, torn down, and turned away from. In verse 6, he says, for you are a people holy to the Lord your God. Think about it. He said, why is this severe action required. He says, you've been separated to God. You belong to him. You are his possession. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession out of all the people who are on the face of the earth. He's saying, you realize who you are and whose you are? That of all the earth, I chose you? That's why in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, he's speaking to us new covenant Christians, and he said, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who's called you out of darkness into this marvelous light. So obviously, the idolatry and darkness of the culture has to be destroyed, put away, torn down, because that's the only way that we can proclaim his excellencies, not our own. We're not talking about how good we are. We're talking about how good he is, for he is the one who has delivered us. Titus 2:14 tells us that who gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to purify for himself a people for his own possession who are zealous for good works. So then we need to stop and ask ourselves, do I live each moment and each day out of this beautiful relationship, realizing that I belong to him, that I am his possession, his prized possession? You see, when we live out of this kind of a love relationship with God, the love that God has for us, that we belong to him, how can we allow ourselves to be distracted from our King or his kingdom? He said, I brought you out, and now you're to be a people who are zealous for good works. Not zealous to do good works to be received or accepted, but because of who we belong to and who lives in us. We're a new people with a whole new way of living that reflects that we belong to him, that we are not our own. He goes on in 7, he said, it was not because you were more in number than any other people that the Lord set his love on you and chose you, for you were fewest of all the people. But it is because the Lord loves you and is keeping oath that he swore to your fathers, that the Lord brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God, the faithful God, who keeps covenant and his commandments to 1,000 generations. He's a God who keeps covenant and steadfast love for those who love him. Man, we have been redeemed. We've been taken out of the bondage of slavery to sin. And he calls us our own. Not because we were a great people, a brilliant people, not because we had so much to offer him. He said, I chose you, Israel. You were the fewest in number. And he goes, even to us, he says, man, not many wise. 1 Corinthians verse 26 begins, he says, for consider your calling, brothers. Not many of you were wise according to worldly standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. And God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. And God chose what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring things that are, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. He loves us for his own sake, and there is nothing for us to boast of. 1 Corinthians 1:9 reminds us God is faithful. He called us into fellowship of his Son, and he's faithful. Not everything in life is pleasant, but God is always faithful. Live each moment realizing that you are his own possession, beloved. And then let him reveal anything that's distracting you from the King and the kingdom, and hear his voice, and let those idols be torn down. I hope you'll live out of this love and be the vessel in which he can love others. Have a great day.